It's interesting, as Brussels and the ECB call for Germany to spend more, they're actually going to reduce spending. Is this because of a budgetary shortfall?
Germany has less revenues coming in, or additional revenues, than was planned. The German economy is growing less strongly. Germany is very exposed to the global uncertainty, the trade conflicts in particular.
But there's no budget deficit, right? In fact, Germany still has a gigantic budget surplus.
We Germans we like budget surpluses, and the difficulty is that Germany has its own debt brake, and its own debt brake basically means it has to run a surplus because
it has a legal debt ceiling,
as a
legal device,
legal debt ceiling saying structural deficits of no more than 0.35% of GDP, with the economy being above potential. It essentially means the German government has to run a surplus, a small surplus. The tragedy of this issue is that the government is not spending enough on public investment, on infrastructure, on digital infrastructure, on education. And that's my concern, that it's going to cut those expenditures that are urgently needed, thereby in the long run weakening economic potential in Germany.
Anna?
Tell me a little bit about where you want the government to spend more money then, Marcel. If there were the opportunity, where would it be best spent? A lot of people talk about infrastructure spending, but there are capacity constraints.
Well, I think Germany really needs a long-term plan on investment. Germany has a strong deficiency in transport infrastructure of about 7 to 10 billion euros a year. Germany has a weakness in the municipalities, where more than half of all public investment is taking place. Germany has one of the weakest digital infrastructures in Europe. That's a gigantic task, both private sector but also public sector, of about 60 to 100 billion, not annually but in total. Germany is spending less than comparable countries on education, so you can really see the range of investment that is needed. Yes, you're right, the concern is Germany's economy is at capacity at the moment. Housing prices are increasing. But what is really needed is a long-term plan by the government over the next 10-15 years to permanently increase public investment. That will increase capacity, thereby also growth potential in Germany. So it's a win-win. Germany can spend more, Europe benefits overall as well.
Does Europe benefit? The Volker Wieland and some of the other so-called wise men argue that there's just not enough spillover effect. Though when you talk to people in Brussels, they say, of course, if you hire, other European contractors to come in and do the jobs that you need, that's going to help everybody.
It is a win-win. Other countries are benefiting. If there is a fiscal stimulus in Germany, particularly on public investment, clearly the spillover is not one for one. It's maybe 10% of additional growth that's generated in Germany will spill over to other countries. But still, Germany is the biggest economy. It has the strongest economy overall. So clearly it would provide a welcome stimulus. Germany itself doesn't need a stimulus right now. The economy is fine. But still, thinking ahead over the next 3 or 4 years, I think it would be very wise to increase investment now.
Here in Berlin, there's a lot of complaints about rising rents, lack of apartments. No one's investing in building spare capacity. At the same time, why would you invest here when the government is talking about not only a rent freeze, but even privatizing, taking back private investment and Eignung, they call it here. Does it make sense to you that someone would invest more in building capacity in Berlin housing?
That's the irony. What you see now in cities like Germany is that the public sector for too long has ignored the issue of investment, including in housing. The only way to solve this issue is by increasing the supply of land to make it attractive for investors to come in, to build, and thereby to lower the price increases. But that will take time, and the German government is trying to find a bridge over the next few years how to prevent rent increases. And the reality is rents are increasing so much faster that actually wage increases are too small to really compensate for that increase in the cost of living.
It's interesting. We had, I think there was a comment from the CEO of either Vonovia or Deutsche Wohnen who said he thought actually maybe the rent cap is okay. We need a few years to figure out how to deal with this problem. So it's more complex than that. Marcel, let me finally ask you about defense spending. We point out that they're going to spend $6 billion more. We think about $6 billion more on defense. But as a percentage of GDP, Are we getting any closer to the 2% level or even the 1.5% level that Chancellor Merkel has promised by 2024?
It will be a very, very hard thing to achieve. 6 billion is 0.2% of GDP. Germany currently is spending about 1.2% of GDP on defense. So probably Germany will not get there by not even to 1.5% by 2023. In particular, if you look at the newest budget, it has a temporary increase in defense spending, but then over the next few years, actually it leveling off. And talking about capacities, the German defense ministry really has an issue of building up, of realizing those investment projects. Rather than looking at the amount of money spent, a more important priority should be the efficiency of it. And there Europe and Germany are lagging behind. You have no procurement all over Europe. It would make a huge improvement in efficiency if all 28 EU countries said, look, we allow procurement from other European countries. So the short answer is no, Germany won't get even to the 1.5% over the next few years. But most Germans actually welcome that.
Even if you don't look at the promises made to spend 2% of GDP, is the German military in a position to fulfill its objectives, to fulfill from a domestic standpoint, to do what Germany needs the military to do?
Well, I think one has to make the distinction between what Germany's government is spending on defense and what the German military is taking as a responsibility in global conflicts. And the German military is in many different war zones where it does make a contribution. So I think that distinction is important. Yes, spending is less than the commitment, but in terms of what the German military delivers and contributes, I would say it is delivering and it is keeping its promises.